Bet you weren't expecting this one. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, and in today's Servant Spotlight, we'll be taking a look at the only servant good enough to make me overturn my policy on not reviewing 3 stars, the coup killer himself, Houzouin Inshun. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize him effectively, and an overall grade comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 3-star servants. Now on to Houzouin stats. Houzouin has a max HP of 9,996 and a max attack of 6,791, which becomes 7,130 due to his Lancer class modifier. His stats are poor for a 3-star Lancer, having just average HP and the lowest attack stat among them. However, his HP does rank very high among 3 stars overall, with his attack just being below average. His stat spread is very defensive, favoring HP much more than attack. As for his skills, his first skill is Knowledge of Soa, rank B. It applies Sure Hit for 3 turns and increases his critical star drop rate for 3 turns between 10 and 30% depending on level. His second skill is Martial Aestheticism, rank B. It increases his quick card effectiveness for 1 turn between 30 and 50% depending on level. It also increases his mental debuff resist for 3 turns by 100%. And finally, his last skill is Sen no Sen, rank B+. It inflicts Noble Phantasm Seal on an enemy for 1 turn and decreases their defense for 3 turns between 10 and 20% depending on level. As for his passives, he only has one, Magic Resistance D+, increasing his debuff resist by 13%. Moving on to his deck and Noble Phantasm, Houzouin has an Arts Quick deck with Quick, Arts Buster, and an Arts Noble Phantasm. His Noble Phantasm is Oboro Uruzuki Juichi Shiki. It increases his attack for 3 turns between 30 and 50% depending on level. It also increases his critical star drop rate for 3 turns between 100 and 200% depending on overcharge. It also increases his crit strength for 3 turns by 100% and applies Death Immune for 1 turn and Evade for 1 hit. Taking a closer look at his cards, we see that his Quick card hits 3 times, his Arts hits twice, his Buster hits twice, and his Extra Attack hits 4 times. He has an NP gain rate of 1.06% and a star rate of 12.2%. This is some good NP gain due to the high NP gain rate and only 1 Buster card deck, and also some really good star generating from the Triple Quick deck. Houzouin is a case study for just how deceptively strong a servant can be. On paper, his stats do nothing to paint him as an offensive threat. He has very low attack, only 1 Buster card, and his Noble Phantasm doesn't even deal damage. Yet somehow he possesses the power to make even top tier 4-star Lancers like Lolter ashamed. And he does this through a combination of incredibly versatile skills and a stellar Noble Phantasm. First, on the skill front, Houzouin has a quick mana burst in the form of Martial Aestheticism, bestowing him with a 50% quick buff for a turn and a 100% resistance to mental debuffs. For those of you who don't know, mental debuffs are a very narrow category. It mostly just means he's immune to charm while this skill is active, so it hardly ever comes into play. But what does come into play is that quick buff. It may seem weird since he has an Arts Noble Phantasm, however the quick buff has a fantastic synergy with his deck and Noble Phantasm because it drastically increases his star generating and single turn burst with quick cards, which is a key element of his playstyle. Speaking of star generating, Houzouin has another means of increasing his star gen through Knowledge of Soa, which gives him a modest 30% buff to star gen and applies Sure Hit for 3 turns. The Sure Hit is nice to have for some boss fights and challenge quests, and it does last for 3 turns instead of the usual 1, making Houzouin a great counter for evade spammers. But the star gen is the most important part of this skill, as again, crits play an important role in how Houzouin deals damage. So having a low cooldown star gen steroid with his already triple quick deck makes his ability to crit even more consistent. Finally, Sen no Sen is a high utility skill that inflicts Noble Phantasm Seal and decreases enemy defense. Decreasing enemy defense is, of course, very good for not only Houzouin, but for the team as well. It's effectively a charisma buff, but focused on one enemy. The NP seal is just as important because it allows you to control the flow of battle and is absolutely invaluable in boss fights, especially during the late game. Skill priority for Houzouin should be Martial Aestheticism first, as the quick buff is valuable for both damage and star generating, followed by Sen no Sen for the defense down, increasing your overall damage, and then Knowledge of Soa last because the sure hit is situational and you already have more than enough star gen. Despite having an offensive skill set, Houzouin's Noble Phantasm doesn't actually deal any damage. Instead, it provides him with a plethora of buffs. It buffs his attack, crit star drop rate, crit strength, and grants him immunity to the death status and one-hit evade. This Noble Phantasm is very versatile and powerful. In fact, it's probably one of the best Noble Phantasms in the game at any rarity. The buffs are not only plentiful, they're also immensely strong. Even at NP1 100% overcharge, Houzouin is getting a 30% attack buff that stacks multiplicatively with his quick buff. He's also getting a 100% crit star gen buff for his triple quick deck, and a 100% crit damage buff. For perspective, that is equivalent to Emiya's Hawkeye skill and Hert's Valor skill, plus a free evade and death immunity, all wrapped into one Noble Phantasm. A Noble Phantasm that is also easily spammable given Houzouin's ability to crit and his good NP gain. In other words, it's not difficult to have 100% uptime on all of these buffs, or even to stack them and give yourself a free evade every 2 to 3 turns. And this is what makes Houzouin so deadly. Regardless of his low attack, when his Noble Phantasm is active, his crits can hit harder than any 3-star or even 4-star Lancer can. Therefore, the most critical aspect of playing Houzouin is maintaining the buffs from his Noble Phantasm. If he can maintain his buffs, he can be one of the strongest, tankiest, and most high utility Lancers in the game. However, if is the operative word. Houzouin's only real weakness is his own inability to influence RNG. He needs to crit, otherwise he won't be doing any damage and he won't have enough Noble Phantasm gain to refresh his NP buffs. As a Lancer, his star weight is just average, and he has no Star Gather buff, which means unless you're producing 30 plus stars a turn, Houzouin becomes very inconsistent. Thankfully, with all the crit gen buffs that he has, he does a great job of star generating for himself, but if you get bad enough cards in your hand, it can also screw him over. Oddly enough, Houzouin is actually a servant that does better on his own, as teammates are going to steal stars from him and flood your deck with bad cards. This makes Houzouin somewhat of a solo god, up there with Herc and Ku, but nevertheless, FGO is a team game, so there are some viable options available for teammates. Houzouin is a servant that doesn't want to compete with other offensive servants, so if you have him on your front line, you should make sure that the other 2 servants can lend major support to him, or at the very least, not fight him for stars. Also, he only really works in crit teams because that's where all his damage comes from. With that in mind, you want servants that can either produce more stars, buff his star production even further, or buff his NP gain or charge. The best options are Nero Bride, Brynhilda, or a star generator like Fuma. Nero Bride has a lot of tools that Houzouin can make use of, like her NP gain buff, which later becomes an NP charge, and her large buff to star generating. Bryn, despite being offensive, has the only targetable star gather buff in the game, which makes her invaluable for making Houzouin even more consistent by directly addressing his biggest weakness. While Fuma and the other star generators can just flood you with stars to reduce the RNG risk factor. Houzouin's Bondcraft Essence is Jumonji Yardi. It buffs quick card effectiveness of all allies by 10% and crit strength of all allies by 15%. This is a good CE, but there are better options. You primarily want a craft essence that buffs your star gather rate or your Noble Phantasm gain so that you can be more consistent. So I suggest Talk of the Hot Sands, Seal Designation Enforcer, Kitchen Patissiere, or Teacher and I. All of these are going to help you with being more consistent in landing your crits and charging your Noble Phantasm. Houzouin has enough buffs in his kit that you don't really need any more damage buffing craft essences, but if you feel you want more damage anyway, just go with a simple quick buffing craft essence like Imaginary Around. In the future, be on the lookout for Dance with the Rounds, which buffs star absorption and Noble Phantasm generating immensely, and the upcoming Trick or Treatment for yet more Noble Phantasm generating and bonus crit damage. Overall, Houzouin is not only one of the best 3-stars in the game, but also one of the best Lancers period. He has incredibly versatile skills, making him perfect for nearly any situation. He has some of the strongest self-attack buffs of any servant. His NP gen and start generating are great, making him very self-sufficient, and his spammable evade and NP seal give him very strong survivability. However, keep in mind that he is a very feast or famine servant. If he's not able to crit, he can't do much of anything, and other servants can get in his way, making his usability in most teams pretty limited. But as a 3-star servant who can honestly stand toe-to-toe with 5 stars in terms of damage output and overall viability in the meta, he deserves nothing less than an S from me. Houzouin is no joke, and I highly recommend rolling for him if you're just starting the game or if you're in need of a strong Lancer. And those are my thoughts on Houzouin. The comparisons to Ku are unavoidable, so let me just say this. I think they're about equal. Both of them are top tier soloers, but Ku is far more tanky, while Houzouin is far more offensive, so just stick with your favorite. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. I also have a spotlight out for Archer Inferno, linked down below and on screen right now, so check that out if you haven't already. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I will see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.